Okay, well, let's make a start. We've got a jam-packed schedule today. Welcome and thank you for joining this, our third student debrief. Just as a reminder, perhaps for those of you who have come to previous ones, or for those of you who are new to these debriefs, they are quarterly catch-ups between the OFS, students and student representatives. And the aim of these events is to ensure the OFS can share relevant information and also receive student feedback on a regular basis. So your input today will be used to shape our approach to protecting students. And there will be plenty of opportunities in this session to input your thoughts as usual. Just a few housekeeping points before we begin. As I said, we will be encouraging your active participation throughout this presentation, and there will be some interactive elements for you to get involved in. The session will last an hour and there will be time at the end for questions and feedback. And if you would like to speak or ask a question, please use the Q&A function at the top of the toolbar. We will be recording the start of the session for students who can't attend today, and this will be published alongside the slides. And you can also find the recordings and slides to our two previous debriefs too. However, we will stop recording before receiving your feedback, so you feel able to speak and discuss the prompts freely. So it's really great that you've been able to join us today. And I'm now going to introduce some of the panel. So next slide, please. So for those of you who are new to the debriefs, I'm Emma Maskell and I'm Head of Student Engagement and Information at the Office for Students. And today you're also hearing from John and Jess. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is John Blake, and I'm the Director for Fair Access and Participation at the OFS. So I'm responsible for all of our work on equality of opportunity in entering and proceeding through higher education. And I'm also responsible for our funding policy, our skills policy, and lifelong learning. So very pleased to be here.
Thanks, John. And we're also joined by Jessica today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Emma. Hi, everyone. Really great to be here. My name's Jess. I'm Head of Strategy at the OFS. So I'm responsible for overseeing the development of our cross-organisational strategy.
Thanks, Jess. Okay, so what are we going to be doing in today's session? Next slide, please. So today's session, we will be explaining how we've been engaging with students to date on artificial intelligence or AI and what we have learnt so far. And some of you might have been to some of the workshops that have already taken place. We'll then explain how we, as the regulator of higher education in England, are thinking about artificial intelligence in the context of our responsibility to ensure that students from all backgrounds benefit from high quality academic experiences. And we want to listen to you to understand what opportunities do you think AI creates for higher education? Do you have any concerns about the impact of AI on your higher education experience? And what do you think of our proposed approach to AI use? There will also be a brief update on what's been done more across the OFS since our last debrief. But before we find out about that, next slide, please. Just want to let you know, as usual, how your input will be used. So these events are a great way for us to get your views and experiences as part of our work to understand and act in the interests of students. And obviously, so far we've focused on some of the cuts, as we'll find out later, being made as a result of some of the financial sustainability issues within the sector. We also heard about the main issues facing students in our first debrief. And as you'll see, these comments, feedback, observations from these sessions and the Mira boards may be used to inform and develop our policy and could appear in OFS publications. So in order to protect anonymity, any contributions we will use will be unnamed and most likely be paraphrased. And as you say, all this input is really important in helping us understand the student interest, and believe me, we really do take it on board and use it. And I'd like to invite Charlie back. For those of you who were at our last session on those financial cuts within the sector, Charlie led a fascinating session, and we heard from you the impact those cuts were having on the student experience. So Charlie, what's been happening since we last spoke?
Yeah, thanks, Emma, and thanks for having me back. I'm Charlie, and yeah, really glad to be here. I lead the student participation team here at the OFS and also one of our core regulatory teams. For those of you who were not at the last session, just to kind of bring you up to speed, so I'm leading a project at the moment to really think about and understand the risks, the impact of the risks to financial viability and sustainability for providers. So that's universities and colleges that we regulate, what the impact of those risks are on kind of provider behaviour and ultimately student experience. So I'm really pleased to be back. I really just wanted to drop in, to be honest, to say thank you again to those of you who contributed to the session last time. We got a really rich set of information from you to really prompt our thinking. So there's quite a lot actually that we've been doing since that session to kind of build on what you told us. Firstly, we've obviously shared your insights with the relevant policy teams across our organisation, and I've got to say that they were really pleased to hear from you and to kind of better understand your experiences of this. Obviously, we spend a lot of time at the OFS trying to kind of think through how this might land and how it might be feeling for you, but there's absolutely nothing that you know cuts it in the way that you're able to just very directly and clearly tell us. So it was really great to see that. Off the back of the discussion we had in the Miro board and everything that we kind of talked through, we've been now using that input to conduct some further insight work, because we would like to look into some of the things that you were telling us about the risks relating to, for example, staff capacity and teaching quality, facilities and extracurricular opportunities, support for mental health and well-being, course changes, closures and assessments, student finances, fees and financial support, and changes to student unions and grant funding and so on. So there was loads for us to consider there. We've now conducted a student exploration, just taking a bit of a deeper dive into some of the themes that you were talking to us about, and to kind of cast the net a little bit more widely. We've started a desk-based literature review as well, looking at kind of articles and reports about some of the stuff that you were telling us about. And we're also looking at some of the data that we hold. We're also commissioning some interviews with providers, so universities and colleges, to really understand a little bit more about the decisions that they have taken, that they may take, and in their view, the potential impact of those decisions on the things that you and therefore we care about. So we're still at quite an early stage of the work, but what you told us has really shaped the way that we're moving forward with that and the kind of lines of inquiry that we're taking. So we'll be considering all of that and how we can monitor any risks going forward, whether or not there are things that we can do to address or to reduce some of those risks in line with what you've told us and your ideas about what you think OFS could be doing here. And we are expecting to put out a report in the autumn to kind of bring all of that together. It may be that I come back and talk to you about some of that before that point, if possible, and to kind of test some of that thinking. But we'll kind of see how we get on. So that's kind of it for now. Obviously we're doing all of this alongside our kind of routine day-to-day work, particularly with individual providers to understand their financial health better. So we've just conducted an interim annual financial return, not very catchy title, but essentially just to keep a real close eye on exactly what's happening with individual finances. We're delving in where there are kind of major transformations happening or complexity to improve our understanding. So, for example, we've been commissioning some external financial consultant reviews to inform our regulatory understanding. And of course, we will be working with any providers to kind of protect the student interests in the event that there is a risk of market exit, as we have been doing for some time now. The only other thing I wanted to say is that obviously remember, as well as if you have any concerns, as well as working with your provider to inform them of your concerns or student feedback around kind of how changes are being made and the impact of those on students, you can always submit a notification to us if there are things that you would like us to know about. As I kind of mentioned last time, each provider sits within a core regulatory team here at the OFS. And each of those teams keeps quite a close eye on kind of what's going on across the board, but with particular providers. We engage with them around any major things that are happening and any regulatory risks. So it's always really helpful actually for us to have intelligence from students about kind of what's going on, how it feels, and the impact of any decisions on particular student groups. So I really would encourage you to use that notifications channel. As I mentioned last time as well, a lot of our work is behind the scenes with providers for obvious reasons. So we may not be able to say an awful lot about what we're doing with those inputs that you provide us with through notifications. These are really sensitive conversations with providers, but trust me, your insight and your inputs are hugely valued, and it makes the conversations that we're having with universities and colleges far richer, and obviously any action that we're taking much better targeted to protecting student interests. So do keep talking to us through these channels, through notifications, and we can kind of help to direct any of your kind of thoughts if that's helpful. That's all I wanted to say for now. Emma, is there anything that I didn't cover there that you wanted me to cover?
No, that's great to hear how all that super valuable information is being used and informing our approach. So thanks, Charlie, and we look forward to welcoming you back soon.
Lovely. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Okay, so now I'm going to hand over to Jess, who is going to introduce what we'll be talking about today. Jess.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emma. So I'm going to start by setting out a bit of context. Why have we come to you to have a conversation about artificial intelligence in higher education? I mean, as I pose the question, it strikes me that most people on this call could probably answer it already, because there is so much public discourse about AI kind of in the general public sphere at the moment. So not exclusively in relation to higher education or even education specifically, kind of the impact of AI in the world in general is something that it feels like everybody is talking about at the moment. I suppose the more specific context in relation to us as the regulator of higher education is that over the past year or so, we've been doing a lot of engagement with students and institutions and sector representatives and policy experts as we've been developing our new organisational strategy. And AI came up again and again and again in all of those conversations, both as a huge opportunity and as a potential risk. So it's something that we think we probably need to do a bit more thinking about as an organisation. There's also lots of kind of really compelling research in the public domain about increasing uptake of AI among both students and institutions. So the think tank HEPI published some really fascinating research which shows that last year, 66% of students said they were using AI in one form or another. This year, 92% of students are using AI in some form or another. So in terms of year-on-year increases, that's really huge, and kind of points to a future in which artificial intelligence is just an everyday part of the higher education experience. We also know that academics are increasingly using AI to support their teaching, with evidence that I think just under a quarter of academics were using AI in 23-24. Obviously, that means 3/4, 75%, aren't using AI. So that raised some questions in our minds about whether we as the regulator could be doing more to encourage more AI use by institutions and academics. But of course, that needs to be responsible AI use that kind of benefits students and serves the student interest. So that's the kind of backdrop for this conversation. We think all of that means that we as the regulator need to really reflect on our own approach. And I'm really keen to have a conversation with everybody here today about what that should look like. What are the things that we need to be thinking through as we develop the OFS's approach to artificial intelligence? If I could have the next slide, please. So as Emma mentioned in her introduction, we've had a number of conversations with groups of students about artificial intelligence already. They were really rich, really interesting conversations. So thank you to anybody on this call who has participated in previous discussions. What I want to do now is kind of play back what we've heard and test it with you, see if we've kind of got it right. Are there things we're missing? Have we got the wrong end of the stick somewhere? Are there other things we should be talking about? Have we misunderstood something? So I'm going to kind of relay what we've heard, and then we're going to be asking you whether we've got it right. So I think the headline is that we've heard a huge amount of enthusiasm about AI from students. They think that it's something that can enhance their higher education experiences in really exciting ways. And they recognise that AI is really critical to their future employment prospects. It's something that it's not that employers of the future will expect students to be AI literate. It's something that employers are expecting today. We've heard about kind of really exciting ways that students and institutions are using AI. So lots of students are using AI to break down barriers to learning. So to simplify really complex documents so that they're more digestible, to generate ideas and prompt thinking. And institutions are using AI to enhance learning for students. So that could be virtual reality headsets that mimic real world scenarios for paramedics, for example. Or it could be to provide real-time feedback on students' work. So there's none of this kind of waiting weeks and weeks and weeks to find out how you've done on an assignment, because AI can tell students immediately. We've heard kind of a widespread expectation among students that their institutions take advantage of the opportunities that AI presents. This is something that the students we've spoken to have told us they expect their institutions to be doing. And the number one ask that we've heard from students is for greater clarity from their institutions regarding acceptable AI use. So we've had lots of nervousness from students about being the right side of the line. They're not always sure where AI use is acceptable and where it isn't. And that means sometimes they don't use it when they might be able to, or they do use it when they shouldn't, and end up being kind of entangled in a disciplinary process that could have been so easily avoided if the institutional policy was clearer. So these are the key things that we've heard. But as I say, I'm really keen to kind of test whether that feels right to you, whether that resonates with your experiences at your institutions. So now I believe a colleague is going to magic up a Miro board, and I will be handing over to John, who will talk us through using the Miro.
Hello, thank you very much, Jess. So colleagues who've been on these events before, maybe familiar with the Miro board, you'll see that there's a lot of sort of pre-generated post-it notes essentially on there, and you can navigate on there and you'll see, yes, there's a visiting artist there, so someone's there. I should say, if you find yeah, there we go, loads and loads of them. If you find those slightly overwhelming, you can switch off the see other people's marker so that it looks slightly less like a sort of psychedelic screenshot. But unfortunately, I'm far too old to know exactly how you do that. So, but if you should be able to find a button on there that allow you to do that. But otherwise, if you could pick a post-it note or as many post-it notes as you wish, and could you share with us your thoughts on what Jess has just said? But also particularly, we're keen to understand sort of opportunities AI brings to improve experiences of teaching and learning, the importance of AI literacy, and the need for clearer guidance on acceptable AI use from institutions. That feels to us like what we've heard as the most important areas. As people begin to think about that, I'm going to pick up on some of the pre-submitted questions that we had and share with you my personal views rather than any formal OFS views, because we don't have any of those yet. But I think had a fabulous question coming in, say, is AI really the future? Which feels like quite a big question to answer. And one of the reasons that we're testing this, I'm old enough to have lived through and been a teacher through multiple stages of sort of technological revolution, and my take is that this is certainly one of the most dramatic changes we've seen. But even if it were only comparable to the impact of introducing computers into classrooms or the rise of email, it would already be quite transformative. The question is, how do we understand how that worked? I went to university at a point where mobile phones were becoming a common feature of life. It wasn't always predictable how they would change what happened, but undoubtedly they did change it. So trying to think a little bit about that. Some really interesting questions about assessment and about how providers and lecturers can understand whether or not students are using too much AI or too little AI or whatever. And I think that's part of what we'd be interested in understanding more of your view about. Clearly, if we end up with a world in which students get AI to write their work and then teachers get their chance to mark it, we'll have this sort of vast endless cycle of AI doing everything. And I think part of our point is the need to, as we think through this work, is also to be clear why doing work for yourself is also an important part of learning. And if you don't do that, you're not really getting the benefit of higher education, about how you can use AI for that. And we've also had a number of questions raising the environmental impact of AI, which I think is really important. I have to admit, I'm slightly skeptical of some of the claims that people say, oh, the only reason we're keeping on our power stations is because AI is using it all up, given that there is quite a lot of money in energy at the moment. But certainly the whole, the size and scale of internet usage across lots and lots of things we do, and the way in which we power things is something we need to really be thinking about, and we'll consider that. So that's just some initial thoughts back on those bits. But in the interim, if people can be sharing their views on the Miro board, we've already got some bits and pieces coming on. I realized I wasn't really specific about which color we were supposed to use. Should I have said that? Some people have written, you know what, it doesn't matter, just use whichever one you want. Oh, I see, because there's different questions. That makes sense, doesn't it? So blue for importance of AI literacy, orange for opportunities of AI to improve teaching experiences, and purpley red for need for clear guidance. So anything we've got in, let me look in the different areas. What sort of thing? No, don't do that. What sort of things have we got? So what does this say? I can't read that. I'm sorry, this is like watching, somebody's aged grandparent learn how to use like TikTok or something, isn't it? I apologize. Oh no, it's all gone horribly wrong.
So on the blue side, John, we've got guidance needs to align with what's taught and allowed in schools and colleges, perhaps mirroring on that sort of transition through. And we've also got graded use should be introduced as well.
I'd be interested more in what that graded use point means. If someone could sort of express that sort of bit more detail about what they mean by that. I think on the school thing, partly because I came from the school sector, I remain enormously keen on building those cross-phase work. And I think trying to understand, again, for this generation of students, I mean, I'm conscious that not all students are 18-year-olds, we know that, but the largest tranche of entry into undergraduate is from 18, 19-year-olds each October. What their experiences or your experiences have been of AI in the school space feels to me really important. Because clearly, I think one of the earlier questions we also had was one about, is the level of AI usage and AI literacy amongst, I can't remember which gen letter we're on now, but is it not the same? And I think I'm very conscious that we can sometimes assume a level of sort of computing literacy that isn't there. One of my partner's daughters found it enormously confusing to work out how to navigate when she started school, to work out the file explorer system of Microsoft Windows, because she was familiar with iPads, and that wasn't really how those things worked. And I think there is something about what people understand. I think other points we're picking up here. So use of AI could widen educational inequalities. That's absolutely true. Again, I think a number of these points are ones that AI makes acute, but not necessarily problems itself. We know that all resources are, easier to come by for advantaged students. So, how are we going to manage that?
Some really good points as well around sort of providing advice and training for students, but also to counter that, there's another point here in terms of students themselves probably have the most experience in terms of using AI in their academic life. So making sure that students are involved with forming how it's integrated into education and assessment as well. Some really interesting points coming through. Thanks, everyone.
That's great. And we want to, I think we're nearly at time for this stage of the activity. So we give everyone another minute, Emma, and then we'll move on. So any other thoughts that you want to add? And as I say, we will then, as you saw from Charlie at the beginning, we take this away and we sort of synthesize all of it, but all really, really helpful in allowing us to think about this.
Some really good points here around intellectual property, particularly around artists, and that being used to feed algorithms as well.
And I think, I mean, I find some of the discussion around this, sorry, just to share anecdotes where people are writing, but I will remember being on the university council of my institution 20 years ago when Google was offering, they would for free digitize the entire archive of the university library. And everyone thought this was a terribly good idea until people asked questions about, well, what actually happens to all the digitized content and who can use it and how do you work that? And actually IP is not without enormous complexity there. And we can see, we've already had controversies about production studios using AI in, production of movies or images and things like that. And I think that is a genuine problem. Although if anyone did see the latest Lion King movie, it looks like it's been written by AI anyway. So that's that's slightly segueing into film criticism here.
Also, some really good points here as well, though. We're talking about intellectual property in terms of the arts, but also in terms of falling foul of plagiarism protocol as well, and that line.
And I think it would be interesting for us to understand more about students' experience of it. I know. Turnitin and other plagiarism detection software is still in operation in some, do people feel those are effective? Or is it fair? Does it make sense to you? Is it working for AI? Because again, a lot of this change is happening directly on the ground, and we won't see it until we won't see the systematic outputs until much later. So getting a sense of that is really useful. Okay.
Probably a good point then to move us on to what we think are next steps.
Thanks very much. So we back to Jess.
Back to Jess.
Thank you very much. And I think there is a slide that will appear. Perfect, thank you. So as I said, we're kind of thinking through our organizational approach to artificial intelligence. And to be more specific, we're thinking about whether it would be helpful to put a statement of some sort into the public domain, which provides greater clarity and kind of explains our thinking in terms of the regulatory approach that we propose to take. But what should that statement look like? What should it say? What should it do? What should it definitely not say and not do? I'm going to run through our current thinking, which, as Emma said, is provisional at the moment. We're still developing it, we're still testing it, and we really welcome your input to try and help us establish if we're on the right lines. So starting with what we think it shouldn't do, we don't think that we should start kind of prohibiting particular uses of AI, saying to institutions, you can do this, you can't do that. The reason for that is because the kind of range of use cases is so incredibly diverse and it's changing all the time. So trying to kind of keep up with that and take a view on whether something is good or bad, we think that could be a real barrier to innovation, and it isn't something that we could do effectively anyway. So we propose retaining our principles-based approach to regulation in relation to AI, where rather than being specific about what institutions can and can't do, we set out the outcomes that we expect institutions to achieve, and kind of leave it to universities and colleges to make sure that they get there. So that's kind of the first point. We think that we should use a statement, some sort of public intervention, to actively encourage institutions to innovate and experiment, to try new things. There's this really exciting new technology that presents a range of opportunities that we know students are really excited about. And we think that we should say explicitly that we think institutions should kind of experiment with what AI could deliver in their particular contexts. And we kind of recognize that in the process of innovation and experimentation, that mistakes may be made. That's kind of inherent to any sort of experimentation process. And I think we should kind of accept and recognize that. But at the same time, we expect institutions to identify and manage those risks. So it's not about saying, go and try new things and we'll let you off the hook, even if the consequences are negative. It's absolutely not that. But we think that kind of a proportionate approach is to say, experiment, try new things. There are huge upsides here. We recognise there are some risks, but as long as you're managing them sensibly, we think that's okay. Going back to what I said previously about this number one ask from students being clear guidance, we propose basically setting that out, being really clear that we think that institutions need to have clear, accessible policies on acceptable AI use within their institutions. And that doesn't necessarily have to be kind of for the whole institution. It might be at faculty level or at course level, but it's really important, we think, that students understand what they can and cannot do. And that should give them the confidence to use AI well, develop the kind of AI literacy that we know employers really care about. And then crucially, we think that it's important that we don't kind of see an endpoint here, because the technology will continue to develop and change. So we as a regulator need to continue to speak to students, to speak to institutions, to speak to policy experts, so that we keep pace with these changes and are able to continue kind of reviewing our approach and ensuring that it remains appropriate as the world around us is changing. So they're the kind of core strands that we think should shape our approach to AI, but really keen to kind of test with you whether you think those feel about right, whether we're missing something, or if you just disagree with what we're proposing altogether. So I am going to hand back to John, and we're going back to, I think, the same Miro, but a different part of the Miro, to get everyone's input.
So if you you can now see the Miro board, hopefully, and on there you will you may need to scroll around on it to find, yeah, there's another bit over there, the sort of purpley ones. Yeah, so if you could share your thoughts on there, please, and I'll do the same and pick out ones to chat about as people go.
I can see everything, but I needed to leave and rejoin. I think it was just glitching. You should say it might be.
Okay.
Your headphones not.
It might.
That was Martha, who's running our the whole system for us. So it's good, always good start. Yes, I can see visitors are turning up here. So yes, if you go a little bit to the right of the last set of stuff you're looking at, you should see a large set of purple notes with a different question in the middle. And if you could start filling those in, that would be fantastic. So I think if I put that there.
Sometimes scrolling out helps you focus on to the next part of the Miro board as well. So if you scroll right out, you should be able to see a purple block, a block away from the multicolored block, or the block we've just been doing.
This is what the future actually is going to be, is slowly explaining new technologies to people over and over again, in the hope that everything keeps working.
It's always really the first time you use something like this. So I know, first time I used Miro, it was a bit confusing.
Yeah, but these are as you have seen, these are really valuable, and does really mean that we can get a load of really interesting stuff coming in. So just to pick out a couple of things that we're seeing here. So work with colleges to ensure successful transition. Yep, I think that's always a big part of all of our work and everything. But yeah, I think there's a real, you know, that point about integrating across the different pieces. Some examples of how it can be used, best practice, and also I think probably bad practice. We've got some reference to monitoring approaches overseas to ensure we remain globally competitive. You know, I think that does seem very important, but yeah, and sort of working out how we can manage that process sensibly when not all overseas competitors are necessarily operating in the same ethical market. Right, a policy or guidelines for institutes to use allow freedom to innovate but not too broad. Yep, I think that sounds about right. I think the main thing is to work out what those lines would be. I've now been doing this job for nearly 4 years, and my most regular discussion with universities and colleges is that they'll say, can you tell us how to do this? No, don't tell us that much, tell us less. So trying to calibrate that right is challenging, but yeah, it's what we're looking for. Others think that we should be avoiding influencing the discussion. We should listen to universities and learn. I think we would try and say that we always do that. Whether the universities would say we do that as well, I don't know. Some notes about training. I think, yeah, the importance of compulsory training. I think that's an area we've been thinking about in a number of different areas as well, and trying to make sure if training is genuinely effective. I'm sure everyone in here has done some online training that could have been, you know, probably an email, but also other online training that's incredibly useful. Equality of access, subscriptions. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's one of the challenges we ourselves are having as we think about AI, is that these things are not, you know, they're not cheap, certainly. Yeah, any other thoughts? So if people keep chugging on, we'll do that. I'll see if there's any other questions in the pre-submitted one that we want to answer. I think there's some interesting questions here about use of AI in formative and summative assessments, and I think there's I think to go back to one of Jess's points earlier, I think there's some real potential with generally with AI and other computerized tools for authentic assessment, and trying to work out how to put particularly skills-based vocational courses, put people into a space where they're experiencing things that otherwise you wouldn't be safe to let them experience. Is it possible that OFS guidelines and policies are made compulsory to follow? We step very lightly on compulsory guidance. It's not impossible. We can bring things in through our condition of registration, but it's one of the founding principles of the OFS that institutions are that we should always be considering their autonomy. One of the interesting things about the current moment is obviously there is a live example in the United States of what happens when a government chooses to interfere with higher education, and it helps us think about, what are the legitimate limits of what government and the regulator should and shouldn't do. Which is not to say that we wouldn't, but we have to think very hard about the use case for that kind of stuff and whether we want to do it. And again, I think that's one of the reasons we want to have this conversation now. I think our sense at the moment, if I can summarize what Jess was saying earlier, is that there's definitely a need for some guidance and some frameworks here, but we're not yet seeing a justification for that level of intervention. But it may be if the experience isn't what we've seen, or if that experience changes, that it may become necessary for us to do that. So the ones about recommended uses and systems, again, I think that's an area where we would step quite lightly about whether it be us who do that. There exists in higher education an organisation called JISC, who are responsible for quite a lot of the sort of infrastructural governance that keeps universities online and so forth. And in general, we would, I think, in the first instance, prefer that sector-led organisations were thinking about recommended uses and systems rather than doing it directly. But again, it is something we can do if we need to.
We're getting some really good thoughts about how we should approach. Again, all these contributions are really, really useful. I am conscious of time and want to leave us enough time for questions, which I know you've been doing a few of already. So I will just leave the Miro board up a couple more minutes, but that's a great time. Just to remind you, you are able to answer questions through our Q&A function at the top. Big thank you to everyone who pre-submitted questions to us, but that isn't your only opportunity to answer a question. And obviously, as you're filling out the Miro boards and hearing from us, I'm sure some of you have questions, so do feel free to pop those in the Q&A. We might group questions together, given how many there are of us in this session. So please don't worry if we don't get to your question right away, and do ask questions as they occur to you. We ask participants not to disclose any personal identifiable information during the session, so referring to individual students or perhaps an institution by name, which might allow them to be identified, or if we're discussing particularly sensitive issues. And obviously any personally identifiable information captured will be fully anonymised after the meeting. Okay, so we will dive in to the Q&A session, and I've got John and Jess joining us again to answer any questions that you have.